Everybody's telling me, why don't you just get out?
No.
Don't give up.
I will never give up. Now think about that. If you're running for President of the United States, you want more people. It's a story of addition. You don't push people out of your club. You bring people in. Then the next day, he goes and tries to push the RNC to name him the presumptive nominee after just 2 states had voted. We don't anoint kings in America.
No, I know.
The people of South Carolina deserve the right to vote, as do all the other states. He got pushback. And then we went and saw his campaign disclosures. And that's when we saw he spent $50 million of his campaign contributions on his personal court cases.
And still, despite the polls, despite the narrative that has already been written, Nikki Haley fights on and continues in this fascinating race as she becomes this kind of Don Quixote character in the Republican presidential primary. But I will say, after attending this rally in South Carolina, there is a change of tone, and she's taken the gloves off.
Then he gets a judgment on a court case, and he talks about how much of a victim he is. But the point I'm getting to this is whether it was the night of New Hampshire when he talked about revenge, whether it was after the first court judgment when he talked about being a victim. What bothers me the most is at no point did he ever talk about the American people. He never talked about the fact that we're $34 trillion in debt. He never talked about the fact that only 31% of 8th graders in our country are proficient in reading. He never talked about the fact that we have an open border that is inexcusable and lawless. He never talked about all of the lawlessness in our cities. He didn't talk about the wars that are happening around the world. Bless you, all he did was talk about himself. And that's the problem.
So Haley makes a point. Haley is now directly going after Trump, but she's starting with Trump's lack of substance, which she's been talking about earlier. But this time she's more specifically talking about Trump and saying, why aren't you hitting these important issues? Instead of saying, I am the person who is bringing up these issues, she's saying, Trump is actually not doing something. So there's a bit of a difference in the way she actually talks about the former president. As you can see here, the attacks are very pointed.
What we need to be talking about is what American families are feeling. And right now, yes, we are $34 trillion in debt. We're having to borrow money just to make our interest payments. China owns some of that debt. For the first time, we're paying more in interest payments than we are in our defense budget. You know who's noticing that? Russia, China, and Iran. And I would love to tell you that all that debt was from Joe Biden. But I have always spoken to you in hard truths, and I'm going to do that with you tonight. Our Republicans did that to us too.
Yes.
First, you look under Donald Trump. We can talk about what a good economy it was, but at what cost? He put us $8 trillion in debt in just 4 years. He says that's COVID. That wasn't all COVID. That was less than 25%. He grew government, and he spent it on things that we didn't need to be spending it on. But you also look at what they did when they passed that $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill with no accountability. They expanded welfare that left us with 80 million Americans on Medicaid, 42 million Americans on food stamps. That's a third of our country. And did Republicans try and make it right? Nope, they doubled down and opened up pet projects and earmarks for the first time in 10 years, passing through 7,000 of them last year.
So welcome, guys. Thank you for watching. Hope you all enjoyed the live stream at Donald Trump's rally. Been a little sick, got bronchitis. This is what happens when you smoke 2 packs a day, so kids don't smoke cigarettes. But obviously, time is of the essence. and I want to do a report on a Nikki Haley rally that I went to about 3 days ago in Rock Hill, South Carolina, where there were about 500 people attending, 500 people that still wanted to root for Haley, still, despite pretty much the known narrative that she's completely down for the count and doesn't have a shot in hell. They still fight for her, and they're still attending these events, and they're still supporting her. So it's fascinating because this is a great inside look at American democracy in real time. And I think, for me as a journalist, there's nothing more fascinating than watching a campaign's last gasp and speaking to their supporters that despite their delusion, they still feel like Nikki Haley might be able to win or that she even has a good shot. So, yeah, I'm in South Carolina. The election has gotten, obviously, a lot more slimmer since we last spoke in New Hampshire. I had a great time following around Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson as well as Ron DeSantis, as well as Trump, as well as Nikki Haley. So there are a lot more candidates in the race. This time I've been kind of sitting pretty because it's only been 2. So I think you guys saw the live stream of Trump also in Rock Hill. There's not a ton to say because he's kind of said the same things that he was saying previously. But I think to watch this event of Nikki Haley's and what she's saying and the tactic that she's kind of employing going forward says a lot about the American electoral process, about where the GOP is, and kind of points to the beauty, the kind of tragic beauty of American democracy. That again, she really at this point has no shot at winning, but you can see that Haley enjoys this and is sort of having more fun than ever. It's kind of like Haley Unleashed, and the media has talked about this, but at event after event, her attacks are getting more and more pointed. And here she starts off insulting Trump. She doesn't get as personal right away as she does later on in the event. But look how she goes after Trump in terms of substance and talks about how Trump is the victim. And I think that's smart. I think using the GOP language where the GOP or conservatives say everybody wants to play the victim, everybody wants to be the victim in this overly PC world, Haley is saying Trump always wants to play the victim. So I think kind of, in some sense, painting Trump as a libtard almost in this context is kind of an interesting and new approach. And then Haley, trying to still get some of those conservatives, talks about how Trump is not conservative enough on China, and nor is he conservative enough on the debt.
So how are we going to fix our economy? The way we're going to do it is we're going to start by clawing back the $100 billion of unspent COVID dollars that are still sitting out there. Then we're going to go, instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after middle America, we're going to go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud. 1 out of every $7 was spent fraud. If 8% of our budget is interest, quit borrowing. Cut up the credit cards. You have to balance the budget every day. I had to balance the budget as governor.
So that's the interesting part. It's like Haley is running this campaign from 1996. It's like Haley is almost Bob Dole versus Lamar Alexander. And they're talking about the budget and they're talking about the deficit. And they aren't talking about genuinely conservative things. But the problem is in 2024, nobody really cares. Even committed conservative Republicans, they might not like Trump's personality. They might think he could be subconsciously or consciously racist. They might not think he's a good role model. But even the conservative country club Republicans are not really complaining about the expansion of debt under Trump. So it's weird that Haley, despite not having a shot, keeps trying to grasp at these economic conservatives that don't exist anymore, or maybe they exist with 5% of the vote. So it's very odd that Haley, even though she's having more fun with this, the policy is kind of the policy of the GOP of yesteryear, the policy of the GOP neoconservative. Nikki Haley digs into the neocon stuff, again, to attack Trump and to make it more of a pointed attack, where she essentially says Trump has been supporting a thug, and she exclaimed that she feels like Putin killed his political opponent. So that was actually kind of a bold statement to make, and one that might even make some waves, because I don't think anybody, neither Biden nor Donald Trump, has said that the Alexander Rasmensky, it's hard to pronounce his last name, but the guy who ran against Putin last time around, all of a sudden he died at the age of 40. She's saying that Putin killed him. She's the only person saying that. So if you say Nikki Haley is this overly careful, overly rehearsed person, I thought that was actually a pretty bold and good take.
Donald Trump is siding with a thug who just killed his political opponent, like he's done many times before. Donald Trump just sided with a dictator who arrests American journalists and holds them hostage. Donald Trump just sided with a man where 500,000 people have died and been wounded because of the invasion in Ukraine. And he's going to side with him over the allies who stood with us after 9/11?
And here she's again talking about Trump attacking him, but only because Trump attacked her first on this. And this is the stuff about her husband, Michael. And he said, "Where is Michael?" And I think this was a subtle dig because, interesting enough, when Haley was running for governor, and this came up when I was interviewing Trump supporters today at the rally, there was a big scandal that it was never proven, but that when Nikki Haley was running, she had an affair with about like 5 or 6 men, not all at the same time. Well, not all in the same room, but oddly enough, 5 or 6 men all at this in the same duration. And that was printed in like the National Enquirer and some tabloidy stuff. It's never been really verified. But all the Trump supporters kept talking about that and kept I didn't even bring it up. I just thought, what do you think about Haley? And then they started bringing up the fact that she had slept with all these men 10 years ago, and how Trump's attack on her husband was totally valid because of that rumor. So again, she uses a lot of the Trump attack to kind of throw a joke at Trump herself. And this is the first time I've seen Nikki Haley actually be kind of funny. So this is fun to watch.
But then he doubled down. And he mocked my husband's military service. Now, I will be the first one to tell you, Michael and I are fine. We don't take this personally, because when you're in politics, it's a blood sport. It's fair game. But you mock one member of the military, you're mocking every member of the military. And what bothered me about that is it's a pattern. We can no longer say it was an accident. He said anybody that lost their lives serving was a loser or a sucker. Then he said at Arlington National Cemetery, his question was, what was in it for them? And now he does this. The thing is, he's never been around a veteran. We all know people who have served. We know people who've lost their lives. He's never been near a uniform. He's never had to lay on the ground. The closest he's come to harm's way is a golf ball hitting him on his golf ball. So that leads us to our decision. On Saturday, we head to the polls.
So yeah, that's the crux of it. She did a decent job. Her speech, unlike Trump's, was very focused. It was a lot more human, a lot less careful than the last speeches. And you could almost see a transformation of the audience. In New Hampshire, it was primarily Democrats. But in South Carolina, and of course this is because people know her, it was mainly a lot of Republicans who felt very jettisoned by the Trump takeover of the party and were actually regular voting Republicans. So they're still very much with her. Haley gave a better speech, still not spectacular, but she made a few jokes, as you can see. She came off as more human, so I'll give her credit for that. And guys, if you want the full thing, I don't know if you do or not, but let me know. But yeah, the gloves are off for her. I guess she feels, why not at least run until Super Tuesday? And it's interesting, if you take Trump out of the equation and pretend this is an open seat with 2 virtual unknowns, and one virtual unknown beats the other virtual unknown by only 11 points. Wouldn't you argue that, well, South Carolina, it could still be a battle, and let's say one virtual unknown versus the other virtual unknown gets 60% and the other one gets 40%. Well, that second place person probably still has a shot in Super Tuesday. Obviously, New Hampshire was tailor-made for Nikki Haley, so this doesn't apply, but that would be the argument of the Nikki Haley campaign. The argument would be only lost by 10 points, maybe only lose by 20 points. It's not actually that bad. And in any sort of normal race, you wouldn't count that second place finisher out, at least until Super Tuesday. So she will be fighting until Super Tuesday. She's adamant she's staying in. And I kind of admire that. I admire, not that I agree with Haley on her neocon stances and her conservative stances on abortion, a lot of things, but I admire her fighting spirit. And even when the deck is stacked against you, she feels like, why not continue to run? Now, this is probably in response to some of her donors and people wanting her to continue attacking Donald Trump. But I still feel like she's trying to make her last gasp to fight for the soul of the GOP, which has already been withered away and has already been lost. But at least she still fights on. And it's fascinating to see these people that still come even when everybody is screaming in their face that Nikki Haley has no shot. So let's get into some of the interviews. And first was very simple. This gentleman had known Nikki Haley in South Carolina for quite some time, and his commitment is strong. And I tried to kind of throw him a little ball and explain why Haley could win. I was being overly sympathetic and overly supportive.
Do you think that Trump could stumble, get peeled away from all the law troubles, and do you think he might have a shot at this? We have a bunch of states left. Interested, yeah. So you thought it was a done deal, you wouldn't be here supporting her. Right.
And I really cool interview with this Vietnam veteran who actually crafted one of the most supportive bills of veterans in South Carolina and directly worked with Nikki Haley. So he was bringing his grandson over, and yeah, just he had a lot of interesting stuff to say.
I met Nikki.
Okay.
I met Nikki about 8 years ago.
Cool.
She was governor, and she was very cordial, she was very friendly, and I liked her. She had good responsibilities. She treated us like an equal, not as a subordinate.
Well put.
She got a lot of poise. She's a person of integrity.
Right.
And then we brought our family friend, Dalton Bailey, who's 17 years old. He's learning a little bit about government and politics.
Cool.
And here's a difference between Haley supporters and Trump supporters. I asked this gentleman what issue is most important to him in addition to veterans' rights, obviously. And he said immigration and the relatively open borders and the unchecked flow of illegal immigrants. But he was very careful to say he's specifically focusing on them and not immigrants in general, and not trying to villainize Mexican Americans or second-generation immigrants or Latin Americans who have immigrated here legally. And notice that no Trump supporters ever really try to make that distinction. It's very much us versus them. They don't necessarily think brown versus white, but there's almost that subconscious feeling, I think, when the other is villainized and the other is kind of grouped, right? The MS-13 criminal is grouped in with a gentleman who immigrated, who moved from Mexico 30 years ago and has had a family here. They're kind of all in the same boat. And I say that because of the great replacement theory and the Trump staffers. Trump hasn't endorsed it directly, but certainly Tucker Carlson, Stephen Miller, who works for Donald Trump, have endorsed this great replacement theory, where they're very scared that people who look like me and them will get replaced by brown people, which is very openly and directly racist. Again, it's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Trump is about 2 degrees away from that point of view. But you see how kind of more socially open and tolerant these people are. And I'm not saying the majority of Trump supporters are intolerant at all. I might say it's 10 to 20 to 30% of them. But there is that certain language where, again, it's us versus them. And this guy kind of painstakingly goes out of his way to explain the nuances of his view. I will say, I think people that support Nikki Haley have a little bit more nuance in their political thought.
It's like dominoes, it all falls into effect. I believe a lot of our problem today with our country is because of the illegal immigrants, not the legal immigrants, and maybe not even some of the illegals, but the bad illegals.
Right. There's a way you can control the border without villainizing the people who are here. Yeah, which I think she has. Yeah. It's a balance. Yeah.
Then I found this woman who was a very enthusiastic supporter of Nikki Haley. She reminded me of the Mr. Trump woman at the Trump rally. She was kind of screaming with enthusiasm the whole time. And I felt like I definitely had to interview her. And actually, once I interviewed her, again, with the nuance stuff, with Nikki Haley supporters thinking with a little more nuance on their political positions. This woman was talking, she was a South Carolina local her whole life, was talking about how Nikki Haley was as a governor, and particularly gave her credit for removing the Confederate flag after the tragic shooting at the Emmanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina. So again, even though she's a conservative Republican, she liked that Nikki Haley was a bridge builder and was kind of different, at least on some of the front and center social issues or issues of debate, that she distinguished herself as more of a reasoned, level-headed politician. And again, that probably makes her a much better general election candidate. But a very interesting reasoned take from this woman.
And you think that's important to have our kids look up to somebody, yeah?
Yes, and our children. Oh, look at this. And I am a South Carolina native.
Cool. So you're the real deal. Very cool. Tried and true.
It is not. We gather together in the shooting and the injustices.
Yeah.
We are South Carolina strong. That makes
It's real
me
South Carolina.
proud. Because it is working together as all people. We're not going to get anything done hating each other, killing each other. And look at the children.
And here you could explain here from the horse's mouth why she is still with Nikki Haley no matter what. And again, I've seen an increase of support, especially after Nikki Haley has kind of gone after Trump. Before it was people wanted to stop Trump. Now all these people are attending because they actually like Nikki Haley. So I think her attack of Trump has made her seem more human, more relatable, more likable, and people are now more rooting for her than just against Trump. So it's been interesting.
And,
Be kind. Just
right.
be kind to people.
And do you think she might surprise some people in South Carolina? Are you with her till the end? If she doesn't do well, are you still supporting her?
Oh, yes.
Beautiful.
Oh, yes.
Beautiful.
We need to, I think I'm going to back on her with the battle.
Cool.
Because I
So you're
think
there.
she's very strong to address it.
Yeah.
And we need a fresh mind, a new perspective, and fresh blood, and a new quest to help the American people. Because honestly, that's what the forefathers wanted.
And finally, she says, I'm the little devil in her ear. And I think I'm, as someone who is supportive of RFK, I want to be a little devil in people's ears and talk to people at Nikki Haley events. Might you support Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the general election compared to Biden or President Trump? And interestingly enough, most of the footage I didn't use, I spoke to about 8 people. And 7 out of 8 of them said they would probably vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. should Trump be the nominee. So here's an interesting base of support that people don't think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will naturally have. Pissed off Nikki Haley supporters. That's probably, right now, Nikki Haley is getting anywhere from, at the low end, 20% to 43% of the vote. So if there is 20 to 30%, realistically, of the GOP who is so personally disgusted by Trump, they're not going to vote for him, wouldn't come out for Biden because he's too liberal. Everybody's saying that Nikki Haley is too liberal, but if you actually look at her foreign policy, her stances on a lot of issues, her stances on abortion, for example, whatever it might be, she's not really that liberal at all. So country club Republicans, or more wealthier Republicans, traditional Republicans, are still disgusted by Trump and probably feel like he isn't conservative enough on a number of the issues. So looking at RFK, he's talking about the national debt. He has some wariness of COVID. I don't think a lot of Nikki Haley supporters are necessarily Fauci endorsers or people who support that. So to kind of paint them in that picture, I don't think is accurate. So watch. I mean, if there's 20% of the Trump vote that goes to Robert F. Kennedy, he could be looking at 15 to 20% of the vote. So I think that's everybody says Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is just taking away from Trump. I think he's very much also taking away from Biden. I think he's very much also taking away from Trump. So really interesting election to watch.
If Trump gets the nominations, Trump, Biden, do you go for Trump, Biden, or maybe even RFK if you think that 2 of them are so awful? I might go for RFK. I'm leaning towards him with these 2. Yeah, RFK, yeah. I think there's a lot of voters like that.
You got the devil in the witch. Yeah.
Less of a devil than the others, that's the only thing. Yeah.
The devil, the witch.
Yeah.
I'm over them and their ego.
Amen.
Let me know if you want the full Nikki Haley event or not. Might not be that interesting to you. We will be at Nikki Haley's headquarters tomorrow in Charleston for the final results. That will be live streamed, so stay tuned for that. But thank you guys, and we will follow Nikki Haley into Texas on the way to Los Angeles to cover the Scientology trials, and we'll stop in Mexico along the way and look at the border issue as well. So a lot planned, but thank you guys. Thank you for the new subscribers. Some are Trump fans, some are Marianne fans, some like the walking the live stream with the dog, but wherever you're from, thank you. We're slowly growing, and I appreciate that. And yeah, I'll see you down the road. Take care, guys.